One day I was watching some Netflix show, I can't remember, maybe it was Never Have I Ever, and I saw someone wear a crochet piece. I then thought it would be pretty cool to remake something like that from shows or movies that I personally really liked. And so I zoomed through countless forms of my favorite media and decided to make a little series where I recreate different pieces, whether it's crocheted or not. Welcome to episode 1, where ikoxun recreates not 2, not 3, but 4 different pieces from 4 different films. Will she succeed? Will she fail? Continue watching on... It looks like melted Spider-Man ice cream.
Has it on DVD, you know.
Should we watch it?
The first piece I started with was Fezco's blanket from Euphoria. This blanket appeared a couple of times in the second season. Once where he was placing the blanket over a young ashtray, another time when he was placing it over Faye, and the most noticeable time when he was watching Stand By Me with the beautiful Lexi. I started with this one because I already had a ton of black and white yarn. Did all of the shades match? Nope. But I didn't care because no one but me is gonna notice, and probably you now that, you know, I mentioned it. The blanket was pretty simple. Make granny squares and attach flowers on top. I analyzed as many screenshots of the blanket as I could because I wanted it to be as accurate as possible. I noticed that the flowers have 2 different color bases. Some of them were yellow and others were white. The other thing I noticed is that the granny squares had 5 rows due to the row here having 4 gaps, and the only way to get 4 gaps is to do 5 rows. And then of course do 1 row of black before attaching all of the squares together. Another thing I analyzed was the size of the blanket. Lexi looked pretty cozy with the blanket, so I gathered that it was the size of a normal throw, which is usually 50 by 60 inches. So I decided to do 8 rows of 7 squares, which meant I had to do a total of 56 squares so that the blanket can be 50 by 60 inches. And I love a blanket that I can wrap around myself, so I wanted it to be big. But I ran out of yarn, so I was only able to do 7 rows of 7 squares. One of my crochet books I got from the library had the exact pattern that I needed in order to make the flowers, so that was convenient. So with all of this analyzation, I got to work on the squares, and man, the squares are easy, but after the first 5 squares, I was like, okay, I hate granny squares. But I always say this when doing granny squares. I say that I'll never do them again, and then find a project that looks cute, and then return back to making granny squares. So now, here's how to make the Fez blanket. The first thing you're going to do is create a slip knot with white yarn and a 5mm hook and chain 4. Then join the chain in the round by inserting your hook into the first chain you created and pull the yarn through both loops, which is a slip stitch. After, chain 3. In the middle of the chain is a little gap. You're going to insert 2 double crochets into that gap. For a double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the gap, yarn over again, and pull through 2 loops. Then yarn over again and pull through the last 2 loops. Do this one more time. The chain of 3 we did earlier counts as a stitch, so that's why we only did 2 here. After that, chain 2 and create 3 double crochets into the gap. After that, repeat the chain 2 and then 3 double crochets for 2 more times. At the end, chain 2. In total, there should be 4 sections with 3 double crochets and a chain of 2 in between. Slip stitch into the first stitch on the row to end the row. To start the next row, slip stitch into the next couple of stitches until you reach a gap. Slip stitch into the gap and then chain 3 into that gap. After, double crochet 2 times into that gap. After 3 double crochets, chain 2 and add 3 more double crochets into that gap. This is how you create a corner. After, chain 2 and add 3 double crochets into the next gap. Then chain 2 and add 3 more double crochets. Repeat this until you reach the end of the row. At the end, chain 2 and slip stitch to close the row. For the next row, slip stitch until you reach a gap, slip stitch into the gap, and chain 3 in the gap. After, double crochet 2 times into that space. After 3 double crochets, chain 2 and add 3 more double crochets into that gap. After, chain 2 and go into the next gap with 3 double crochets. This gap in the middle of the 2 corner gaps only get 3 double crochets. After, chain 2 and move on to the next corner gap. You're going to continue this pattern of 3 double crochet, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets into the corner gaps, and then 3 double crochets into the middle gaps for a total of 5 rows. You can count the rows by the corner stitches like this. Once you reach the end of the 5 rows, slip stitch to end the row, chain 1, and cut the white yarn off. Then attach your black yarn into any stitch and repeat the same steps as the previous rows for 1 row of the black. Here I'm showing you how I weaved in the white yarn as I crocheted with the black. At the end, chain 2 and slip stitch to end the row, chain 1 and cut the yarn. Then your square is done. To do the flowers, first create a magic circle. To do this, wrap the yarn in the direction shown here. Then put your hook under the first yarn and over the second. The hook should pull the second under the first and twist as it does. Then put the hook under the second yarn again and pull that through the loop you created by twisting the hook. It's hard for me to just pull it through, so I take the circle gently off my hand and use my fingers to pull it through. In the circle you created, you're going to double crochet and then chain 1 8 times. So first, chain 1, then double crochet, then chain 1, then double crochet, then chain 1. At the end with a chain 1 and then pull the yarn attached to the first stitch to close the gap in the middle. Then slip stitch the circle together and chain 1, cut the yarn and pull to secure. For the petals, attach the orange color and chain 4. You're going to then half treble crochet 5 to 6 times into that one gap. To half treble crochet, yarn over 2 times and then insert your hook into the gap. Yarn over and pull through, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then instead of finishing the treble crochet, begin a new half treble crochet into the gap. Do this until there is 5 in one gap and 5 stitches on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through all those loops to round the top of the petal. Then chain 3 and slip stitch into the same gap as the half treble crochets. After that, slip stitch into the next chain space gap and repeat the previous steps until your flower is complete. If the gap in the middle widens, you can pull the yarn to close it up again. To end the petals, slip stitch into the first gap and then chain 1. Cut the yarn and pull to secure. Then to shape the flower petals, just bend them backwards so they can look more fluffy. To attach the flowers to the granny squares, place the flower in the center of the square and take a darning needle and use the ends of the flower to push it through to the back of the square and then tightly weave them in. Make sure you weave them in tightly or they can fall off or just feel really, really loose. And then you're done. Now, make a billion more. After, align all the squares in the length and width you want the blanket to be and slip stitch them together with the wrong side facing up so the slip stitching won't show on the right side where the flowers are. Only after finishing the blanket did I realize I did the flowers wrong because I went to rewatch the scene and the flowers don't even move and mine move all over the place, but hey, I tried. So I had to go to the couch for this one because when we see the blanket, it's on the couch. So I thought I would test it out here. So this blanket, I would give, I think this is 8.5, mainly for 2 reasons. The first reason is I didn't know that it was going to take so much white yarn. So because of that, I had to literally pick up any white yarn that I had in my closet. Thankfully, I had enough to finish this, but a lot of them, if you can see here, some of them are more like snow white, some of them are more of a cream white. The flowers aren't done exactly the same way they did in the show. It still looks like it, but if you watch some clips that I showed earlier, you can tell that they don't flop around like this. But besides those 2 things, this is very warm and comfortable. I think because I connected all of the granny squares, it made the blanket have a certain weight to it, so it kind of feels like a weighted blanket, which is always a plus. And you can just cuddle up, watch some Euphoria, just like this, and chill. I guess not Euphoria, you should watch Stand By Me, I guess, to really feel like Lexi with this blanket. But yeah. The Tanjiro cardigan was supposed to be done like 8 months ago, but I just never got to it. I finished one panel and let it just collect dust until this video. For this cardigan, I wanted to make it look more like his haori than a cardigan per se, so I analyzed some screen caps of him wearing the haori and took note of the pattern. On his haori, he has 6 columns of 7 squares on the back, 2 columns of squares in the front, and his arms have 6 columns of 4, making it baggy, which is why when he lifts his arms up, it tends to fall swell up the arm and expose his other clothing underneath the haori. So I wanted to make it as accurate as possible and got to work. Here's the pattern in visual form. I don't go too into detail on making the squares since it's the exact way I do it in my cardigan tutorial using the color changing method. So I made all the squares and columns I needed in I think 6 to 7 days. It was a total of 118 squares to do, so it made sense why it took so long. Once they were all done, I attached the back panel together, the front panels together, and the arms together. I then laid everything out and began slip stitching everything the same way I did with the fez blanket. I got so worried since I wasn't adding a collar or a button band how it would turn out, but the only way to find out how it'll come out is if you try, so I just went ahead and attached everything as planned. Make sure that you're attaching them with the right side of the back panel up and the wrong side of the front panels up. That way when you flip it, everything looks accurate. After the front and back panels are attached, you're going to form the armholes by slip stitching the sides of the cardigan together until there are 3 squares on each side left. So only slip stitch 4 squares together. With the arm panels, you're just going to flip them right side out and then put it inside the armhole and then slip stitch it so when you pull the arm out, the right side will show. The piece that I'm showing is Tanjiro's cardigan, which is really his haori, but you know, you can't really crochet a haori because it's like not yarn. Anyway, I said I was gonna finish this like 8 months ago, but I never did it until now, so here you go. It came out pretty nice. It's very comfortable and it's very loose and just perfect. Like I said earlier in the video, I made sure to make everything exactly the same as the like little screenshots that I took. That's why like the arms are pretty baggy, and that's why I didn't make a ribbing. Like if you look at the close-ups and stuff, I made like single crochet just so it can even out, but essentially it doesn't have a ribbing, so that's why it kind of falls off the shoulder a little bit, but at the same time it's just like how it is in the anime. So I think I did an okay job. For the rating system, I think I would be giving this an 8.5, mainly because it does fall off the shoulder unintentionally when I don't want it to, but at the same time it's very stylish. It was easy to do. It took a long time, which docks off a point in my opinion. Yeah, it's very soft, very warm and cozy, which keeps high points. So I guess I'm just knocking down like 2.5 points because of how long it takes to make and the fact that it kind of just like naturally slides off like that.
Put them back. But Mom, the whole school's gonna wear boring gray clothes. No one will have these. Put them back.
Oh my twitchy witchy girl, it's time to conquer your famous gloves. I've wanted a pair of these gloves forever, and now I'm actually gonna make them myself. The wild part is that I already had the colors for the gloves in my closet thanks to my love of keeping so much yarn that I barely even use. Almost every project in this video has helped me use a lot of the yarn already in my closet. I mean, it saves money, so I'm perfectly happy with that. Because I don't know how to knit gloves yet, and this is a crochet video, I decided to use the waistcoat stitch to make the gloves look as accurate as possible. I created the first glove so I can practice what exactly I was even going to do. I first tried to see if it was possible to add 2 colors to the ribbing. It's really easy to do in knitting, but in crochet, it's a process of color changing constantly. I didn't like my results, so I just made the ribbing regular and then did the waistcoat stitch. Once I reached the fingers, I thought it would be easy to make the fingers for the gloves, but it was a very long and painful process, like actually painful because this was my 3rd project in a row and my hands were over it at this point. point. The fingers looked ugly and I didn't like it, so I decided to just make the gloves fingerless. Then the practice glove was a success. So here's how to make your own fingerless Coraline gloves. The first thing you're going to do is create a slip knot and chain 4. Then work half double crochet down the row. Chain 1 and turn your work. Then for the rest of the ribbing, work half double crochet into the back loop only. You're going to do this for 13 rows or until it comfortably fits on your wrist. At the end, put both ends of the ribbing together and slip stitch them together to join them in the round. For the gloves, you're going to switch to your light green color and do 1 single crochet into each place you can until you reach the beginning of the row. Slip stitch to end the row. From here, you're going to only use the waistcoat stitch. To do the waistcoat stitch, instead of going under each stitch like normal crochet, you're going to work into the little bar here and single crochet into that. You're going to do that into every single bar stitch. It's hard to get into it sometimes, so try to keep a loose tension while working. Once you reach the end of the row, slip stitch into the closest stitch and continue on without flipping your project. Here's a little visual of how many rows there are for each color. Once you reach where your thumb is located, you're going to put the glove on and then place a stitch marker at each side of your thumb. I put the stitch marker closer for a tighter fit. Then waistcoat stitch until you reach the stitch marker. At the stitch marker, chain how many spaces there are in between each stitch marker, then waistcoat stitch into the opposite stitch marker. After you do that waistcoat stitch, continue to waistcoat stitch around until you reach the chain. In the chain, you're going to work 1 normal single crochet into the back of each chain until the other side, and then continue with waistcoat stitches. When you get to that area again, just continue with your waistcoat stitches as it will fully develop the little cozy space for your thumb. At the end of your glove, I personally stopped it just above my knuckles, slip stitch to end the row, chain 1, and cut to secure. Then your gloves are done. But first, you have to make another one for your other hand. So with the Coraline gloves, they're pretty easy to do. I would rate these an 8.5 as well, mainly because when doing the waistcoat stitch, I was working a lot slower than I usually would when making any type of crochet, and 2, it was hard for me to keep the seam line straight because when you're working the waistcoat stitch, you don't turn your work after each row, you just continue on, and it was just hard for me to figure out where to put the seam line exactly. And I also docked the point mainly because of myself. I wasn't able to actually do like the finger parts of the gloves because they were taking a really long time and they were too bulky and just plain ugly when I was doing it. So that's another reason why it's an 8.5 to me. But it's very comfortable, it fits perfectly well. It looks like the knit stitch just as I thought it was gonna look like, and yeah, I think it's a success in my book. Hey Coraline, do you think I did good remaking your gloves? Yeah. She thinks I did a good job. Okay, let's just give it the quick intro like the others and then get into why I sound so exhausted.
I almost forgot.
Dad!
Whoops! You should put this amulet on. It'll grant you wishes for, like, ponies, or whatever kids like.
Marceline is a vampire in the show Adventure Time. In 2 episodes, she wears this oversized sweatshirt with a distinct red cat on it. I thought it would be cool to create a crochet version that looks like knit, so after gathering the yarn that I wanted to use, which is the only yarn in this video besides a couple of colors for the fez blanket that I actually purchased, I decided to do the Tunisian knit stitch. The Tunisian knit stitch uses a really long crochet hook that has an extra long plastic tube at the end for large projects. So I got started with this technique, and behold, I didn't like how it came out. In the screen caps I have of Marceline, the sweater seems to be oversized since it's hitting her thighs, and the bulkiness of it makes it seem as if it's chunky, so I decided to go for a chunky look for the sweater. It also looks like it has a high neckline, so I decided to give it a turtleneck type of neckline too that can be flipped to make it chunky. I liked the length of this Spider-Man shirt I was wearing, so I measured that out to be 27 inches in length, and then I took my shoulder width, which was 15 to 18 inches, so I just chose a random number for how oversized I wanted it to be and chose 25 inches just cause. I also measured the neckline of the shirt since I liked how it sat on my neck, and it says it's 6 inches wide or 15 centimeters. So I got started with half double crochet using weight 5 yarn and an 8mm hook. I chained 6 and then half double crocheted down the first row, and then in the back loop only for the rest of the bottom ribbing, which was 34 rows wide. I then single crocheted into each space on the top of the ribbing for the first row. I chained 1, turned, and then got started with Tunisian crochet. The yarn was a bit too rough for the Tunisian crochet technique, and the farther up I got with the Tunisian crochet, it occurred to me that it was just making the sweater way too frigid, and I like at least some form of movement in my pieces, so I took it apart and just settled with half double crochet. Side note, I really don't enjoy the look of crochet sweaters, which is why I haven't really done them besides that one Burger King sweater I attempted. Also, because the BK sweater didn't come out good, I knew this was my chance to perfect the art of crocheting a sweater. After finishing the back panel, I did the front panel until I reached the point of where I needed to decrease for it to fit over my shoulders properly. So I measured the decrease point 5 stitches away from the middle on each side. I wanted my neckline to be close to my neck since I didn't want a loose neckline. I was super particular about this, as you will see later on. For each side, I decreased for 6 rows before the front panel reached the same height as the back panel. I then realized I needed to make the back panel with decreases too, so I pulled the back panel apart until it reached where my neckline of the front panel was, then added decreases exactly the same. I then slip stitched the decrease sections wrong sides together. Here, I was just trying to figure out how I wanted the seam to look like. I wasn't about to do this, but man am I glad I did. I tried the sweater on and realized the neckline was way too low for my liking, so then I took the front and back panel apart and pushed up the decreases until it only took 4 rows to decrease for it to reach the length of my liking. Imagine me finding this out after attaching the arms. I decided to do the neck ribbing before the arm since I wanted it to be perfect. So I single crocheted all around the collar and then chained 30, I believe, and crocheted all around in half double crochet in the back loop only for it to be a disaster. For the first attempt, I tried it on and it was just way too big. I thought it was because I chained too much, but we'll figure out what happened soon. For the second attempt, I chained the chain to 10 and then went around like normal, and then I tried it on when it was finished. The length was good, but it was still way too wide. I just wanted it to look like this, which was like, in my head, I was like, why was this so complicated? I then realized I should probably decrease in every other stitch when I do my single crochet around, and did that. After a successful 6th try, I moved on to the arms. I didn't record much after my second attempt because it was like 2 a.m. and I was over it. I made the cuff with the chain of 6 and half double crocheted into the back loop for 15 rows. Then I made single crochets on the top of the ribbing, and in the next row I did 2 rows on increases into every other stitch to make the arms nice and chunky. A bit too much, but we'll get there in a bit. After around 15 rows, I changed the color to the red color for Marceline's sleeve design for 10 rows and then switched back to the gray for 7 rows. Then I bind it off and attached the arms to the sweater on the wrong side. I attached them the same way I did in my knit cardigan video. I find this method a lot better than working in the round and then attaching it. It just attaches it a lot gracefully in my opinion. And then it was time for the cat. I didn't use a graph to make the cat like I should have because I was reading through this book I got from the library and it showed me a technique called surface crochet, and I was like, that looks so much cooler than using a graph. What if I use that to make the cat? So I made a small tester square and used this marker to draw out the cat shape and began to practice making the cat. All you're doing is slip stitching into the holes of the crochet piece in any shape you want. I just knew it would come out as beautiful as Marceline herself. So I changed my marker color to a dark gray just in case I made mistakes, and used these stitch markers to really figure out where the design will be. I did the eyes off camera, and after 2 hours I was pretty happy with how they came out. I even did the outline of the cat, which came out cute. So what went wrong? How did this turn into this? Like, what is this? What is this? It looks like melted Spider-Man ice cream. I think because this was the last piece after working day and night on the other 3 pieces that once I got to this cat, my hands wanted to punch me in the face. I literally laid down on the couch after making this and stared at the ceiling for 20 minutes, reconsidering everything I've done in my life. I know it's not that serious, but for me, it was at that point. I was really upset with myself actually, and I was conflicted because I have a great mindset about things happening for the reasons that they do and learning from your mistakes and knowing that nothing is perfect. You can't have wins without some losses, and I did learn from my mistakes and so much lost time. I will make a better crochet sweater in the future with a design that I come up with. But as I was about to end the video, I decided that the perfectionist in me just couldn't live with her own failures.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
So after picking myself up, I grabbed the sweater from the closet and got to work with fixing it. I took the time to take the cat design out without wasting a lot of the yarn, and I was pretty successful with that. After I took apart the sweater, which took longer than I thought because of course I weaved everything in after attaching it, but I got everything apart, and after I went to Stitch Fiddle and created my own cat design for the sweater. Then I got to work using the grid pattern I made, which took 10 times faster than creating the surface crochet. You live and you learn. Okay, this is so much better. Let me put my hat back on. Before I talk about the sweater, I put these passion twists in my hair thinking it would last until like October, but it's only lasted a week and it's just ridiculous. I don't think I'm ever doing this hairstyle again. But onto the sweater. This looks so much better than the monstrosity of whatever that was. The balloon sleeves are still, you know, balloony. Taking it apart, putting it back together again was the best idea. I couldn't live with my failures, so I refixed it. Now, for the score for this one, I think I'm going to give it a 7 for a couple of reasons. The first reason, the arms are too big. They're comfortable and everything, but if you're just chilling, like look at this. I just look like a balloon, and that's not what I was going for. The second thing is that even though this looks better, it still looks like an alien to me, and I know that I could have done this better. Different parts of it if you can see, they were like, you can see different parts, like especially on the outside, because I was pulling the yarn through and like weaving it in as I went instead of just cutting it, leaving it hanging, and then weaving it in later. That's why it looks like not that good. And the whole half double crochet, I only like using half double crochet if I'm making some sort of stripe pattern so that you can't see that it's half double crochet. I don't really like half double crochet at all. I feel like if I did this in single crochet, this would have looked a lot better, but it would have taken a lot longer and it would have ate up even more yarn. But you ate them, yeah, you ate my fries. But past all of those complaints, this came out a lot better than the old one. It's still very cozy and warm. I am definitely gonna wear it, and I have my own Marceline sweater, so that's cool. Thank you so much for watching episode 1 of ikoxun Creates. Let me know any fun pieces you'd love to see me create down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next episode. I'm just your pride.